Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. This is going to be the first video in a series where we go over team building and the process in which how to team build and how to put together effective teams and all that kind of stuff. So this is just going to be kind of the primer episode where I talk about some generalist concepts and like some essentially stuff that's like I go into each specific ones, and then there's going to be further episodes down the line that split up each like style of team into their own separate videos, so you can kind of just go find the one you want, or you are free to watch them all. So as this is the first episode, the main couple things I want to be covering are kind of generalist things. So the first one is kind of like just how does elemental mastery as a stat work, because this is relatively important to how you build characters and how you field teams. So the way elemental mastery work is the elemental mastery only matters for the character that is proccing the reaction. So the character that triggers the reaction to happen, that's the only person whose elemental mastery matters. So, for example, if we look at a traditional Child and Zhangling combo, Child very rarely is the one actually proccing the vaporize reaction. Zhangling is the one propping the vaporize reaction, so therefore her elemental mastery is the one that's actually important and relevant to damage bonus, as elemental mastery is, for the most part in reaction teams, a stat worth at least investing into, if not heavily. If you're confused on which character in your team is the one triggering the reaction, the easiest way to know is the person that applies their element the least frequently is often the person triggering the reaction, assuming you aren't just going for a one-shot. So assuming if you're going for like a one-shot or something, it's obviously whichever character you line up. But let's say I drop Zhangling's Pyro NATO down, and then I'm auto-attacking with Child. Child applies Hydro all the time on every auto. Zhangling only gets the Pyro effect whenever her NATO swings around and hits. So in that situation, she is the one proccing the reaction. The only time this doesn't really apply is with Anemo characters, as Anemo characters are always the characters who proc Swirl, never the other character. So for that reason, even if the Anemo character applies Anemo super fast, they are still the one proccing the reaction, so their EM is still the one that is being considered when you look at their elemental mastery values and who you should build elemental mastery on. A couple other things is the importance of resonance. Resonance, Jesus, my bad. In team building, and what these are is when you have two units of the same type, they give you a different effect depending on the unit, and there is actually an effect for having four different. But the TLDR is that these are generally just the icing on top of the cake, but there are certain ones that are worth considering going for if it isn't a huge detriment to your team. The fire one being the best, with that 25% attack on there. The ice one being good if you're applying constant cryo for 15% crit rate, and the Geo one being good for extra shield stank and extra damage, as well as Geo resonance. Depending on the team and the specific situation, these have different values, but often it is worth having at least one of these present, most of the time being the Pyro one or the Geo one or the Cryo one being the most common ones used for damage reasons. Now, we're going to go into a couple other things I just want to talk about briefly, which is stuff like the power of the Noblesse Oblige artifact set, which is an artifact set that after you use an elemental burst gives your entire party 20 attack for 12 seconds. This is very good. And in almost every team, this is a set that's worthwhile running, especially if you have characters that snapshot. So what snapshotting is there are certain abilities that whenever they're cast, they take the character's stats at the point of cast, and that's what they count for. The easiest one that a lot of people know about is Zhangling's Pyro NATO. If you use it in a Bennett ult, even if the Bennett ult goes away, the Pyro NATO will still treat it as if it still has been buffed by the Bennett ult, as long as it was buffed at the time of casting. This is important to know as well, because this means in certain teams, that where buffs can be snapshotted. Certain artifact sets and weapons and characters get value. A very common one is, again, with Zhang Ling. If you have a book wielder on the team with someone like Zhang Ling or someone whose burst can snapshot, it is very common to have them on a Thrilling Tales of the Dragon Slayer. As a max refined one, will give them 48 attack. This is generally worth building around. A couple other things. We're just going to talk briefly about batteries and the way energy works in this game. So there are two kinds of particles. There are elemental particles and then generic particles. Generic particles are triggered basically by stuff dying, Favonius style weapons, or specific characters like Electro Traveler. Generally, the way it works is that characters of the same type of element as the particle being generated get more energy. It's still not the same as if they were on the field when they were picking up, but still is a decent amount. So this is why often whenever you're talking about running a character with a high energy cost burst that needs to be batteried, if they can't do it themselves, you often run a unit of the same element. This will come into play with a lot of teams and a lot of stuff we discuss in other episodes further down the line. But this is just a term I wanted to get out there, is whenever I'm talking about, whenever I'm recommending battery units, they're almost always going to be elemental match, because that makes the particles give more value towards ultimates, which makes them easier to battery, or easier to get off consistently. This has just been some kind of primers. Oh, we also need to talk about, there's also something else, which is weak applications and strong applications. So essentially, there is this system in Genshin where whenever you cast or certain skills apply a strong aura, which is essentially that if a reaction is triggered, the element will still be left over from the initial application, basically. This happens with specific characters, and this is more something you need to test. But it is important to know, because in terms of chaining reactions together, it's important to know if someone has a strong elemental aura application. I think that's all I want to cover in this primer. We got, similar to Noblesse, there is obviously the other artifact set, Tenacity of the Millilith. Where is it? I think this is how, is how you get to artifacts. So let's go down here to Tenacity. Yeah, so this thing here, same thing here, with giving you a very short attack buff that can be refreshed. This is also can be worth building around if you have characters that can consistently proc it enough. But I just essentially wanted to get across the point that it is often better to have stuff like Noblesse or Millilith, even if you have to sack the individual character's damage to make the damage of the team higher. In future videos, we're gonna kind of go team style by team style. I don't think I'm gonna hit every team, and I'm not gonna necessarily be super like in depth with how to build every character. I'm kind of gonna leave that to their own videos farther down the line. But this is just supposed to be more of a generic thing, so you can help you figure out how to build your teams and maybe optimize them a little better. But thank you for coming around, and I hope you stick around for any or for the future videos. And if you have any personal like styles of teams you would like to see, maybe just leave them in the comment section and I can get to them. The tentative rough plan right now is to do physical teams, freeze teams, electro teams, melt vaporize teams, and then geo teams. Those are kind of like the 5 I have, and then probably a 6th video on like unique teams and how one would approach building a unique team that fits like none of those. Zhao being like the only character right now we have that fits that mold, but we'll get to that when we get there. But thank you again for watching, and I hope you stick around and are excited for this series.